Greg Allman had just drifted off to sleep on a couch in the tiny attic of his brother Dwayne's girlfriend's house when the idea for one of the Allman Brothers' most legendary songs woke him up. He immediately thought he needed to write it down, but he was warned repeatedly by another couple also staying there that he was not to make a peep as to not wake their baby. He remembered Dwayne's words, "If that baby wakes up, we're out of here, you dig?" Without making a sound, he felt around the wall in the dark for a light switch but could not find one. Careful not to make the old floorboards creak, he inches through the pitch-black house towards the kitchen, searching for something, anything to write with. His hands land on an ironing board. He feels around the counter for a paper or pen, but instead discovers a box of matches. He strikes a match and blows it out, using the charred end to write on the ironing board cover. He scribbles down a few chords, some steps, and some lyrics. He later describes the urgency of the night. "All of a sudden, I woke up because a song had me by the ass. It hit me like a ton of bricks." He doesn't know it yet, but the song will change everything. For him, for the band, while revolutionizing the potential of rock music. Eventually, it evolves into a 23-minute live epic, earning a place on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's list of 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. But before they could get to that point, before the song became legendary, the Allman Brothers would have an uphill climb amid turmoil. And just as the band takes off, a heartbreaking tragedy. The song is Whipping Post. When Greg Allman returned to Florida from California, he brought a bunch of new songs and a sense of relief. He just dodged a near miss when a girlfriend named Stacy was eager to get married. Channeling his mixed emotions and hard lessons, he poured them into what would become the band's first original songs. Meanwhile, Dwayne had been cutting his teeth as a session guitarist at Muscle Shoals, laying the foundation for what will become the early Allman Brothers Band. But before they could record anything, the group needed a new name. Each member scribbled down ideas on scraps of paper and tossed them into a hat. Greg suggested Beelzebub, the right hand of the devil. Dwayne wrote down something inspired by the Lord of the Rings. The other simply put, the Allman Brothers Band. That was the one that stuck. On Greg's first night back in town is when he came up with the song Whipping Post, and soon a couple others. Greg writes in his autobiography, My Cross to Bear, "My experience with that girl Stacy was probably in my head, but I can't say I was thinking specifically about her while I was writing them. Honestly, I don't know where they came from. The words just appeared." This is such a common experience amongst writers. When you're in the midst of life's troubles and tribulations, during the mundane, suddenly magic appears out of nowhere. Lennon said, "I don't know where the songs come from. I just open the window and let them in." When Greg plays Whipping Post for the band, everyone stops and listens. The chords are unusual, the lyrics full of emotion. Dwayne and the others immediately feel its power. The Allman Brothers headed to New York to record their debut album. They recorded and mixed the album in just 2 weeks. The album contains the studio version of Whipping Post. The sessions captured the band's raw energy and chemistry, but when their self-titled debut was released in November '69, it barely made a ripple, selling fewer than 35,000 copies, but it would lay the foundation for the live performances that would eventually define their legacy. The band played continuously in 1970, performing over 300 dates that year, on the road traveling in a Ford Ecoline van, and later a Winnebago named the Windbag. Word of mouth spread due to the band's relentless touring schedule, and crowds got larger and larger with each stop. The close proximity of the Winnebago brought about heavy drug use within the group, as they were struggling to make a living. In one instance, touring manager Twiggs Lydon stabbed and killed a promoter for not paying the band. He later cited temporary insanity. Later that year, Dwayne accidentally overdosed on opium after a show. Undeterred, the band returned to the studio for their second album, Idlewild Sessions, later released as Idlewild South. They poured themselves into the recordings, refining their blues rock sound and stretching out their improvisations. Idlewild South, produced by Tom Dowd, contained 2 of the band's best-known songs, Midnight Rider and In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, which became one of the band's most famous concert numbers. But once again, the album failed to catch fire commercially. Critics were intrigued and live audiences were growing, yet sales lagged, and the band remained largely under the radar. Greg recalls the feeling. When the first record came out at number 200 with an anchor and dropped off the face of the earth, my brother and I did not get discouraged. But I thought Idlewild South was a much better record, and when that died on the vine, I thought, damn, maybe we were wrong about this group. They were down in Miami Beach playing when they look over and see a guy sitting in the grass with burnt sienna suede boots on. Next to him was their producer, Tommy Dowd. Dwayne eases over to Greg and says, "Do you see who the F is sitting over there? Do you see them effing boots, man?" Dowd soon introduces them to Eric Clapton. They ended up jamming together until the next afternoon, with the two guitarists regarding one another as instant soulmates. Clapton reportedly invited Dwayne to join Derek and the Dominoes, and by several accounts he considered it, and if he would have, then the Allman Brothers Band story would have likely ended then, or at least quite differently. In the end, he declined the offer and rejoined his band. The sessions were collected on Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, issued that November. Greg writes of their influences at the time ranging from jazz to psychedelia to blues, saying, "Dickie and Barry had come from that psychedelic scene. Dickie was way into Jefferson Airplane and Clapton's work in Cream. What Dwayne did on Elizabeth Reed came straight from Miles Davis. Barry and Dickie were way into the Dead's American Beauty album. You mix it all together and you come out with a pretty wicked musical brew." But the Allman Brothers' hard work was starting to pay off. They began making more money, and they could see their live performances were really where they stood out from the serious competition in 1971. Finally, it dawned on the band that a live album was the only way to capture the group's real essence. They decided in order to bring that raw emotion to the masses, they needed to do a live recording. The resulting album was At Fillmore East, recorded over 3 nights, March 11th, 12th, and 13th, 1971, at Fillmore East in New York. It was released in July 71 as a double album, people priced for the cost of a single LP. While the previous albums by the band had taken months to hit the charts, often near the bottom of the top 200, the record started to climb the charts after a matter of days. It peaked at number 13 and was certified gold by October, becoming their commercial and artistic breakthrough. The improvisation and length of the tunes on At Fillmore East was more similar to jazz than rock, with just 7 songs spread over 4 vinyl sides, capturing the Allmans in all their bluesy sonic fury. Dickie Betts explains the appeal. "The thing is, we were a hell of a band and we just got a good recording that captured what we sounded like," adds Jamo. Fillmore was both a particularly great performance and a typical night. The blues rock song's lyrics center on a metaphorical whipping post, an evil woman, and a futile existential sorrow. Musically, the composition was immediately noticeable for its use of a time signature in the introduction that has been variously described as a lick in 11. The actual part that played the introduction was devised by bassist Barry Oakley. It gave the song a more menacing feel than the melancholy blues that Allman had originally written. On At Fillmore East, the live album in 1971, Barry Oakley opens the 23-minute whipping post with a rumbling bass that Rolling Stone called the song's haunting momentum, which would become one of the most familiar bass patterns in all of rock. The introduction develops with Dwayne and Dickie Betts' dual lead guitars entering before Greg Allman's Hammond organ joins. Greg's delivery of the vocal culminates in the chorus where he places emphasis on a particular lyric. The vocal parts are spread throughout the 23 minutes, separated by lengthy instrumentals. The rhythms underneath the guitar solos start slow and then build up in complexity and volume until their climaxes, until around the 10-minute mark. Then they take an unexpected turn. The song collapses into near silence, the tempo dissolving into an abstract free time passage. The next minutes are largely occupied by Betts playing some light jazz-styled lines against Oakley's bass line. Between them, the guitarists play half a dozen or so melodies and lullabies, including familiar ones such as Frere Jacques, interspread with classical music motifs, psychedelic blues riffs, and bell sounds. Poe writes that this section is a leap into the unknown. It feels as though everything could simply fall apart at any second, but Dickie continually pulls things back together at what seems to be the last possible moment. Greg returns for one last vocal, and then the guitar slides seamlessly into Mountain Jam as the song fades, leaving the audiences suspended between tension and release. The booming timpani roll of Whipping Post that closes out the album, of a 22-minute 40-second rendition of the song, takes up the entire final side of the album. Listeners would not hear that 33-minute continuation until the group's next album, Eat a Peach, released in 1972. By the spring of '71, as the At Fillmore East album was quickly taking off, Whipping Post and other extended jams were capturing imaginations, defining a new genre called Southern rock, and showing musicians how complex and imaginative a rock song could be. But just as the Allman Brothers seemed poised to reach a new peak, tragedy struck. In a sudden motorcycle accident, Duane Allman was killed, leaving the band reeling. The momentum of their breakthrough collided with unimaginable loss, and with the music that seemed unstoppable, now carried the weight of grief. Just a year later, bassist Barry Oakley, whose playing had helped define the band's sound, also died in a motorcycle accident, eerily close to the same spot where Duane had crashed. The band was struck by grief again, forced to confront the fragility of life, even as their music was embraced by massive audiences, a goal they had worked relentlessly towards. These twin tragedies marked the Allman Brothers in a way that would echo through every performance. Out of the immense popularity of the intense Whipping Post jam, an interesting tradition evolved. Audience members began yelling out "Whipping Post" at other artists' concerts. It became a bit of a joke for a while in the early '70s. And this was exactly what Frank Zappa did in 1974 by adapting the words to his song Montana to reflect allusions to Whipping Post throughout the lyrics. Frank Zappa said of the song, "We were playing Helsinki, and in the middle of this very quiet, nice concert hall, a voice rings out, 'Whipping Post!' When we got Bobby Martin in the band, I said, he can sing the shit out of Whipping Post, and so let's go for it." Producer Tom Dowd describes how revolutionary the Allman Brothers were. The Allmans have always had a perpetual swing sensation that is unique in rock. They swing like they're playing jazz when they're playing things that are the blues, and even when they play heavy rock. They're never vertical but always going forward, and it's always a groove. The album At Fillmore East is considered amongst the best live albums of all time, and in 2004 was one of the albums selected for preservation in the Library of Congress, deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the National Recording Registry. Greg wrote of that night the Whipping Post came to him. "I got it all down on that ironing board cover, in the closest thing to shorthand I could muster up. I was really proud that I didn't wake Brittany up. The next morning, Hop raised so much effing hell with me about that ironing board cover, but it worked out, and we got Whipping Post down that day." And also, if you want to check out the extended version with the full music experience and Greg Allman's take on everything from Cher to the Grateful Dead to the story behind the album cover, be sure to check out the link in the description to my Patreon. Thanks for watching. See you next video.